It's incredibly difficult to define dark comedy. No matter where you look, you're gonna find a different definition. IMDb describes it as combining humor with elements of tragedy, morbidity, and darker themes. Wikipedia defines it in a much lighter way, stating that it's comedy that makes light of taboo subjects. Dictionary.com gives it a much more drastic definition as a form of humor that regards human suffering as absurd rather than pitiable. Merriam-Webster defines it as humor marked by the use of usually morbid, ironic, grotesquely comic episodes. And on the Wikipedia page dedicated to comedic genres, it directly contradicts the main page for dark comedy, stating that it's usually said by a disliked character. The Wikipedia page for dark humor describes it in a way that I've always thought of it as, and what I've always wanted it to be: a more honest and uncomfortable style of comedy that makes you think. Unfortunately, dark comedy is such a broad term that it's not just that. If we're going off of Dictionary.com's definition, it could be as racist or sexist as you want it to be, and it's fine because, oh, I just have a dark sense of humor. I don't agree with Dictionary.com's definition. Considers human existence as ironic and pointless. That literally just sounds like nihilism. Dark comedy is not nihilism. There's a lot of media that uses dark comedy, sometimes in a way that works, and sometimes not so much. The latter is oftentimes because they forget what makes dark comedy funny in the first place. Dark, edgy, and taboo subjects aren't funny on their own. You can't just say something offensive and expect people to laugh. This probably goes without saying, but comedy is one of the most subjective things in existence, so if anything I praise or criticize in this video doesn't align with your sense of humor, that is perfectly fine. And obviously with this video's topic, it would be very difficult for me to steer clear of potentially upsetting topics. So here's all of them. One of the first things that pops into my brain when I think of dark comedy, whether it works or not, is adult animation. Most, if not all, adult animated comedies use some form of dark humor. Some of these shows really benefit from this, but some of them don't fully understand how to make dark topics funny. Sometimes the dark thing is the joke. No setup, no punchline, just offensive thing. This is not funny. About a year ago, I tried watching Rick and Morty for the first time. I got to season 4 before I eventually gave up on it. Throughout my experience with the show, I never outright disliked it. I kept watching because I really liked all the different sci-fi concepts the show explored, but I never found it to be funny. Rick and Morty is known for having a very edgy and adult sense of humor. Almost all of the jokes are in this vein. There are a good portion of the jokes that are well constructed with the setup and punchline. Once in a blue moon, maybe I'd let out a little wheeze. But a large portion of the jokes in Rick and Morty are just edgy things. The same sort of problem pops up in Netflix originals like Big Mouth. I haven't seen much of Big Mouth, mainly just YouTube videos about it. I couldn't bear to watch it on my own. But from what I've seen, the humor in this show is painfully unfunny. Since Big Mouth is a show about puberty and adolescence, which would be a great idea for a sitcom if it was done right, Pen 15 being a great example of this, but Big Mouth mainly just uses this as an opportunity to make sex jokes. And not even funny ones at that. It's kind of like, remember when puberty you wanted to sex? Remember that? Rick and Morty and so many other adult animated comedies are filled with adult content without intentionally using the content to craft jokes. The state of these shows was pretty rough in the 2010s. It's hard to name a show that hit the mainstream that wasn't incredibly cringy. And then Smiling Friends happened. Smiling Friends was one of the funniest shows to ever grace me with its presence. This show can get really dark, but somehow every single time there's a taboo joke, it's hilarious. When this show was coming out, it was so exciting. Everyone I knew was into it. We had watch parties. All right, season 2 is out. Let's watch the entirety of season 1 and then the entirety of season 2. It was hard to find someone who didn't like there's a bug. There's a bug. It was hard to find someone who didn't like Smiling Friends. Smiling Friends works so well because of its characters. These are just a bunch of guys doing their jobs, and whatever happens, happens. And crazy stuff always happens, with most of the humor coming from how they react to it. The bug is back. I really love how this show doesn't overdo it with dark jokes, but whenever it does go there, it is so funny. The main problem I had with Rick and Morty was how it was constantly overdoing it with the adult content, to the point where the adult content was the replacement for comedy. Smiling Friends doesn't do that. This show has such a variety in its humor, and it's so tightly written that it never feels the need to throw some random edgy thing at you for no reason. It feels calculated, like there is serious artistic intent. Look at this scene.
Man, I don't know what to think no more, man.
Okay, let's de-escalate. Nobody's messing with your head.
Get out of my head.
Nobody's messing with your head.
Get out of my head.
No, nobody's messing with your head, man.
Nobody's messing with your head.
Definitely seen you two before. You're trying to mess with me. Get out of my head! Get out of my head! Get out of my head!
You're in my head! You're in my head! moral?
A lesser show wouldn't have made this scene as long and uncomfortable. Forcing the viewer to sit with this has much better build-up and humor than just doing a quick gag of a guy with a gun.
Doing a quick gag of a guy with a gun. I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda.
So Smiling Friends is great, but honestly I don't think the dark topics ever get too bad. The show never gets into anything that's super taboo. That's where Xavier Renegade Angel comes in.
What doth life? Are we just fleshy blips in some meaningless stew of cosmic oblivion? Or is it vice versa?
Xavier Renegade Angel is quite possibly the weirdest show in existence. It wouldn't be surprising if you've seen a clip from this at some point because there's just so many scenes from this that have circled around the internet. This show isn't perfect by any means, but it's just so funny. And it's all because of Xavier. His character is ignorant and stupid, but still incredibly likable because he always has good intentions. And he's hilarious. Every episode feels like a weird, poorly animated, nonsensical dream that requires your full attention to have any idea what's going on. There's a huge variety of jokes in this show, lots of surreal and absurd jokes, but the main comedy style is dark humor. Watch this scene.
Just need to black you up. Flesh colored. How offensive. Oh, shiftless. This ought to get you black on track. Black. This is Shaka Dingo.
He looks just like our Michael right after he got hit by that car.
Shaka Dingo, go hug your new mommy and daddy.
We're not ready for
This
this.
joke is insane. And any other show trying to make this joke, it probably wouldn't come across as funny. And I think a huge part of why it's so funny is because of the delivery and the nonsensical nature of the scene. Xavier Renegade Angel has an absurd off-the-walls energy that it brings to every single second of its screen time. And this energy isn't just for dark jokes. The show has not dark jokes.
What could distract people who love sports? Sports.
And these jokes are still just as funny. I don't think every joke lands, and I cannot recommend this show to just anyone. Because it's ugly and can be a difficult watch sometimes because it can get downright disturbing, which both of those are intentional. But I think the jokes are just so well structured that it's worth mentioning. Another thing is I think Xavier is very similar to Michael from The Office. It sounds like a weird comparison, but hear me out on this one. They're both insensitive and naive idiots with well-meaning intentions, and they're both prone to saying really dark and offensive things without realizing the seriousness of what they're saying. Over the course of The Office, Michael says racist, sexist, and homophobic stuff, but it's not because he's any of those things. He's ignorant and desperately needs attention, so when he doesn't get it, he pushes. In the show, it's very funny because he's actually incredibly innocent. He just has bad influences in his life, such as Todd Packer, who says hateful things knowing full well what he's doing. And the show doesn't portray that in a funny way. Todd Packer's a bad dude. Xavier is very similar to Michael in that he wants to be seen in a certain way that he is not. He wants to be seen as this smart, all-knowing deity when he's actually incredibly stupid, which leads to him saying and doing absurd and insensitive things without realizing the weight of those actions. I think both of these shows, despite how they're nothing alike, are good examples of how dark comedy can come across really well if it comes through a naive and idiotic but well-meaning character. There are other ways to do this, but I think this is one of the main reasons why I didn't like Rick and Morty, because the characters who are saying and doing the crazy things know what they're doing. I just remembered Xavier Renegade Angel has a vehicular manslaughter joke.
Best part is, I'm helping the Earth, getting negative 30 miles to the gallon.
Oh, the cop! I'm helping the Earth. Speaking of vehicular manslaughter. Grand Theft Auto 4. Grand Theft Auto 4 is widely regarded as the most serious game in the franchise. When compared to the other games, it stands out as being much more dark and gritty than the others, which are much more upbeat, with crazy over-the-top action set pieces and wacky characters. GTA 4 isn't that, putting the player in Liberty City, which is Rockstar's depiction of New York City. The game's story is inspired by media like The Sopranos and The Godfather, taking a much more realistic approach to crime than previous games. Despite how serious this world is, this game still has one of the most iconic aspects of the Grand Theft Auto franchise: satirical talk radio and advertisements. Grand Theft Auto has always had hilarious parody advertisements and talk radio. Everything you hear on the radio or see on a billboard, besides the music, is some form of satirical joke. Because GTA 4 has a much more dark and gritty world than the other GTA games, it leans into that with the satirical radio making much darker jokes. And they're hilarious.
I looked at hunger as a supply and demand problem. Too many hungry people. Simple. Rather than reducing the number of hungry people, simply reduce the number of people using involuntary euthanasia for the weak and unfortunate and turn them into compost for our crops. It's simple.
You want to kill people to reduce hunger?
Absolutely. It's brilliant.
It's barbaric.
I blame video games.
Imagine you're just playing the game and the radio station cuts to that. It catches you off guard in the best way. If you heard that coming out of a stand-up comedian's mouth or some character in a movie, it wouldn't come across the same. But this is Grand Theft Auto. And since GTA 4 manages to separate the story and the satirical world in the game, hearing this while driving around is extremely funny. Now, not all these jokes are amazing, and some of them are just straight up not funny, but it's hard to find one that is done entirely distastefully. Man, I sure do love the crime game that is GTA 4. Speaking of crime... These transitions keep getting better. The highest rated TV show on IMDb is Breaking Bad, and the first genre listed under Breaking Bad is dark comedy. The same goes for Vince Gilligan's other shows, Better Call Saul and Pluribus. Now, I don't think this is the first genre people think of when they think of Vince Gilligan's shows. Probably more like crime drama or psychological thriller, but these shows are actually really funny. I've seen all of Breaking Bad, I'm currently watching Better Call Saul, and I still need to get to watching Pluribus. I really want to see it. If you don't already think of Breaking Bad as a dark comedy, here's a few of my favorite comedic moments from the show.
Get off the toilet! Get off the toilet!
Arrested for me.
No, they're not. You're too old for balloons.
Oh.
It's for you to climb down out of my ass.
Oh, yes, that's right. Just south of the airport. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh, how long do you think that would take?
Almost every episode of the show, especially towards the beginning, has moments like this. And the tone, while it gets progressively less upbeat over the course of the series, there's a surprisingly high amount of moments that are played for laughs. The same thing applies to Better Call Saul. One of the reasons these shows are so good is because they don't take themselves too seriously. They always portray people so realistically, and being alive is pretty funny sometimes. Dark stuff happens in life, which is why dark comedy is one of the most relatable and honest forms of comedy. If you've ever been in a situation that was terrible in the moment, but you're able to look back and laugh, that is a form of dark comedy. And I think Vince Gilligan is very aware of this, which is why the humor in his shows is so authentic. There are some pretty horrific events in these shows, but even with that, the comedic moments still shine. That brings us to the horror genre. If you haven't seen Weapons, I'm going to spoil one of the main parts of the movie, so you can skip to this timestamp if you haven't seen it. Weapons is a movie directed by Zach Kreger that came out last year. It's a movie that's advertised as purely just a horror movie. None of the trailers portray this movie as being anything other than that. But just like the Vince Gilligan shows, if you go to the IMDb page, the first genre listed under this movie is dark comedy. Weapons isn't really that scary. The scary parts are few and far between. Most of the movie is characters talking, trying to figure out what happened to these kids that ran away one night. The storytelling style is very similar to the Paul Thomas Anderson film Magnolia, where the story isn't told in a traditional linear way. Rather, you see the events of the story from different characters' perspectives over the course of the movie. I went into Weapons expecting a horror movie, and I got a really fun movie. This movie has more jokes than jump scares. In the dialogue, there's a lot more awkward humor, but I find that the dark humor appears more physically. Director Zach Kreger is going to be directing the upcoming Resident Evil movie, and he was a member of the comedy group The Whitest Kids You Know, which also wasn't afraid to dabble in dark humor from time to time.
It's very illegal to say, I really, really think someone out there should kill the President of the United States of America. That's illegal. Extremely illegal. Very, very illegal. But not illegal to say with a mortar launcher. In Weapons, Zach Kreger uses cuts and physical performances for comedy. In the first, more graphic scene of the film, Benedict Wong's character repeatedly smashes his head into a corpse. It's disturbing to the point where it teeters on the line between dark and cringe comedy. It's dark, but it's also hard to watch in a good way. Somehow. Later on, the same character is running through the streets like this, and getting into fights like this. The way that the stakes are high, but the film isn't taking itself too seriously,
again similar to the Vince Gilligan shows, makes for a weird middle ground between comedy and horror that is incredibly fun to watch. Another example of comedy and horror coming together to make dark comedy is Evil Dead 2. This is another movie that you probably shouldn't get yourself spoiled. Sorry people who haven't seen these movies, here's another timestamp. Evil Dead 2 is a parody of B horror films, which are low budget, often campy horror movies. Director Sam Raimi is essentially parodying himself here. Evil Dead 2 is a movie that did what Weapons did way before Weapons did it. This movie was advertised as a horror movie, but it honestly takes it an entire step further than Weapons did. Evil Dead 2 is a comedy movie in a horror setting. It is entirely a slapstick comedy film, and it is hysterical. As soon as Ash gets flung through the woods 10 minutes into the movie, everything goes nuts, and it's quite the sight to behold. The first time I watched this movie, I had the stupidest grin on my face. Bruce Campbell's physical comedy is amazing. One of my favorite parts of the movie is when Ash thinks he's killed this stupid hand that's been chasing him around, and it turns out he did, but also this happens. The sheer amount of blood is so dumb. It's like an industrial pressure washer is spewing this out. Another funny scene is right here when Ash is getting chased to the house, and it just goes on for so long. This movie is so good. There's another piece of media that I think depicts a good combination of comedy and horror, and it's not a movie. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is one of the most unique examples here. Depending on your taste in media and how you approach it, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared could be hilarious or terrifying. Specifically, talking about the original web series. The 6-episode TV show that was released over 6 years after the final episode of the original web series leans much more in the comedy direction, and it's significantly less disturbing. But both shows can be easily classified as dark comedy. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is a parody of children's television like Sesame Street. In both series, the format is kind of similar to Smiling Friends, just in Smiling Friends, they're helping someone, and in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, they're being taught something. In both shows, crazy stuff always happens, and our main colorful cast of characters is just reacting to it, especially in the web series. In the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared TV show, there's a lot more gags that purely come from the main characters. Basically, there's 2 versions of the series that are completely different. With the web series, the episodes are very short, with the longest episode being 8 minutes long. While with the TV show, each episode is just under 25 minutes, which gives the topics and the comedy a lot more room to breathe. Here's a gag from the TV show.
And the worm in my brain makes me think that the documents I've been forging have led to many deaths. But I know that's just silly.
And here's a gag from the original web series.
Blue.
Red. Green. Green is not a creative color.
The TV show feels much more inviting and comforting, while the original web series feels like it's trying to harm you. That doesn't mean the TV show doesn't get dark, though. It gets pretty dark at times, with certain episodes focusing a bit more on horror than comedy. I think the TV show does a good job of finding a middle ground between these 2 genres, whether they're fusing them together or having separate moments focused on either or. The web series is pretty consistent in its dark tone. I personally think the build-up to whatever scare is going to happen has a lot of funny moments, but not everyone is going to think that. A lot of the jokes can be easily interpreted as off-putting. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is weird, but I love it. I'll end this segment by showing another funny clip.
If you're having trouble coping at work, please ring the below number, or the above number, or the diagonal number.
We've covered so many different types of dark comedy so far. Saying edgy things and expecting that to be a joke is the bad example. The one that, unfortunately, a lot of people associate with dark comedy. But we've already gathered a lot of good examples, like normal characters in an unhinged world, naive characters with good intentions saying insensitive things, a satirical approach, realistic and sometimes tragic situations and finding the humor in that, and combining comedy and horror. But what if dark comedy is used as a way not just to approach the topics in a comedic sense, but also seriously? Okay, we're going back to adult animation now. I've watched a lot of edgy cartoons. Adult Swim has just always fascinated me. It feels like a network that's just constantly breaking the rules and doing what it feels like, picking up artists that other networks probably wouldn't. Moral Orel is at its core a parody of a stop-animated religious TV show from the 60s called Davy and Goliath, but it is so much more than that. The way the average episode of Moral Orel is structured is Orel goes to church, he completely misinterprets something he learns at church, and then all hell breaks loose. The first episode, he literally causes a zombie apocalypse. It's kind of similar to regular show in its structure, where it starts off normal and then chaos. Moral Orel is very dark, and most, if not all of the humor is very dark. Sometimes the show takes it a bit too far, specifically with a certain season 1 episode about masturbating, but for the most part, it's done pretty tastefully. The average dark joke in Moral Orel isn't gonna be that bad. Most of them are like this.
Oh, Doughy. God wants us to beat you kids when you're bad.
He does?
Yes.
Why?
Because.
It's funny. Moral Orel is a funny show, but what really makes it special is what it becomes over time. Moral Orel is one of the only shows that I've seen completely transform into a different show over time. Instead of flanderizing its characters, it de-flanderizes them. By season 3, you're not watching the same show you were watching in season 1. The show eventually changes from a sitcom to a full-on drama, showing the dark stuff and playing them completely straight without cracking any jokes. Funny enough, this approach eventually led to the show's cancellation because of one episode in season 3 called Alone that portrayed women suffering from the aftermath of traumatic events like rape and sexual abuse too realistically for Adult Swim, which is disappointing because that's an issue that's rarely talked about on television and should probably be talked about more. That disturbing episode from season 1 I mentioned was dealing with the exact same themes, just it was making jokes about it. So is it okay to joke about sexual abuse but not to take it seriously? It's probably a little silly that this is bothering me because this happened in 2008, but this stuff still happens today. The only other show that I've seen do what Moral Orel did is Bojack Horseman. Regretfully, I haven't watched the whole show. I finished season 3, which has some of the highest rated episodes of television thrown in there, and then I just stopped. But I do remember Bojack wasn't super depressing at the beginning. In the first season, it was kind of just dark and edgy in a Rick and Morty sort of way. It took me a while to get into it because, like Rick and Morty, I didn't find it that funny. But Bojack is better when it's dealing with heavy themes and diving into them seriously. And I did kind of learn to appreciate the humor more as I started to like the characters. I'm kind of realizing I want to get back into Bojack Horseman. It's a good show. Oh, what am I doing? I should be watching Bojack right now. I think I'm going to watch Bojack Horseman after this. I can't think of a transition. I want to talk about Bo Burnham and Smosh. Both Bo Burnham and Smosh show how comedy can evolve and mature over time. At the start of Bo Burnham's career, his comedy was extremely edgy, to the point where it came across like his main goal was to offend rather than to be funny. Around the same time, Smosh was the biggest channel on YouTube, and a lot of their sketches dabbled in darker jokes that don't hold up very well. Now, I do love a lot of the stuff Bo Burnham and Smosh created back then. They were both very influential on musical comedy and sketch comedy, influencing a lot of people, including myself. But again, if you go back, you'll notice that some of the jokes just don't hold up very well. Bo Burnham's Inside showcases a completely different person, one that regrets his past decisions and is able to reflect on that. The second song on the special, Comedy, showcases his entire mentality going into it. While a lot of it's over-dramatized and played for laughs, there are a lot of moments that feel genuine, and it sets the tone for the rest of the special, which goes back and forth between over-the-top silly and really genuine. And even the silly stuff comes from a very real and relatable place. The realness makes it so that the comedy special is still able to get pretty dark, just like Bo's past comedy, but it feels more mature and like he's really being his authentic self. Smosh is a bit different. The Smosh of today and the Smosh of 15 years ago are not the same Smosh. Early Smosh was mainly sketch comedy, and now they basically never do that, focusing on more unscripted improv stuff. Now the Smosh brand isn't just Ian and Anthony, it's the entire cast. And the current Smosh cast does dark comedy from time to time. Like this.
I should say, I've recently stopped breastfeeding.
And this.
We all know that Rose has passed, but she wouldn't want a funeral. She would want a celebration of life. So we're gonna have a party.
Yeah! Yeah! That's gonna come back, unlike Rose!
Recently, there was an episode of the Smosh podcast Smosh Mouth that had Anna Conkle on as a guest. Anna Conkle is the co-creator of Pen 15, which I mentioned earlier. On the podcast, they discussed the book she wrote on her relationship with her father. Throughout the book, she manages to find humor in some of the darkest places of her and her father's life, even leading up to her father's death. Here's what she had to say on Smosh Mouth.
You're good at capturing the funny of, like, really dark moments, which is very impressive.
I don't know why I like funny and dark. I think when things aren't dark, I don't think they're funny.
Well,
Is that weird?
Tragedy and comedy are, like, right there.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Wait, what did you say?
I said I think when things aren't dark, they're not.
I agree.
Funny. I don't know if that's true across the board, but that's what I'm the most attracted to. Like Strangers with Candy, The Comeback. Those are things that the characters are like so broken and so desperate and pretending and posing to be fine. Yeah, like that's a darkness that I'm like.
Well, because that's
I want that.
Yeah, it's absurdity of just like what the hell is anyone doing?
Remember at the beginning of the video when I mentioned dictionary.com's definition for dark humor and how I don't agree with that definition? Well, that definition just so happens happens to be the same definition that Kurtis Conner used at the beginning of his video about dark comedy. Now, I'm not picking fights here. This video is like 5 years old. I don't have any problem with Kurtis using this definition in his video because out of all the definitions, it fit the best with the branch of dark comedy that he was diving into. The gross, weird, homophobic, racist, sexist kind of dark humor. Kurtis made it seem like this is the only form of dark humor. And he also said the definition was from Merriam-Webster, when it wasn't, but that's just me being nitpicky. I think my problem is, by any other definition, what those people on TikTok were doing wasn't dark humor. I think it more aligns with a kind of humor called aggressive humor. Aggressive humor is unfortunately even harder to define than dark comedy is. It straight up doesn't have a Wikipedia page, or any page for that matter. The only definition is on the Wikipedia page for comedic genres. And when you Google it, there's not many sources, and the ones that do kind of say the exact same definition. Nobody knows what dark comedy actually is because comedy is subjective. Whether you want to make people laugh through a more honest, darker means, or you just want to insult people, dark comedy can be whatever you want it to be. This video exists because I genuinely love dark comedy, and I really don't love how so many people perceive it. When someone references the term dark humor or dark comedy, they could mean so many different things. They could love the authenticity and humanness of it, like Anna Conkle. Or like Kurtis Conner, they could hate the way the term can be used as an excuse for horrible behavior. Wherever you stand on dark comedy, I hope you got something out of this video. Okay, well, I'm gonna go watch Bojack Horseman now. Like, subscribe, all that. Yeah, alright. You're awesome.